All right, Vic. Um, Look, I mean, I think we have to look. What did the Super Bowl tell us? I think, we can talk about the free agents and the cap and all of that, but I think the biggest challenge the Bills face is when you have to when you have issues on the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. That's very difficult to solve in one off season.
I think the Super Bowl told us how critically important it is to have yourself as set as possible with your O-line, with your D-line. And we know those are basic principles of football, but never was it more apparent in a game where you had two of the best quarterbacks in the league squaring off. And frankly, it was the Chiefs' ability actually to get more pressure on Jalen Hurts than the Eagles were able to do against Patrick Mahomes. That was a bit of a surprise, but it told you, again, in the AFC, you have a team in the Chiefs that was able to do that with Chris Jones and company. And that is something the Bills have to look at and say, okay, that's how you have to deal with beating Patrick Mahomes, because the Eagles, who have a great pass rush or had a great pass rush, weren't able to do that as successfully. And I think, again, when a quarterback wins MVP of the Super Bowl, he had some good protection. When a quarterback struggled the way Josh Allen did, especially against the Bengals, he was not getting sufficient protection.
All right, so I'm going to sit here and I'm going to put myself in the shoes of a lot of Bills fans who might be watching this, and to hear you say that, and I agree with you. I mean, this is something we've talked about on the air and off the air. But to hear you say that, given what they've invested, I understand Von Miller was hurt, but again, given first-round pick Greg Rousseau, first-round pick Ed Oliver, second-round pick Boogie Basham, second-round pick AJ Epinesa, beyond Von Miller, what the Bills have invested in that position, and to have that still be a problem, I think it's fair to say causes a lot of frustration for a lot of people.
The dilemma for the Bills is, number one, figuring out how much of Von Miller will they have in 2023, right? And not only having him physically in the lineup, but how good will he be? How recovered will he be from that knee injury? That's number one. And the other part of the dilemma is they've still got to see what they have in those young players, in Greg Rousseau and Boogie Basham, in particular, Ed Oliver as well. You're not giving up on these guys, obviously, at this point, but are you going to be able to get more out of them? And that's where coaching is going to come into play in a big way. Can Eric Washington, Leslie Frazier, of course, Sean McDermott, all of this staff, can they find ways to get more production from these players? Is it a matter of, the individual work? Yes. And the technique coaching, but beyond that, the scheming. I mean, are they utilizing them in the best way possible? Those are hard questions. And then on Brandon Beane, and the personnel department, the question is, can you enhance? Can you do more to make this line better through your drafting and perhaps through free agent signings when you're very unlikely going to be dealing with any splash signings?
When you say the word coaching and run down that list, to what degree, and about, scheming and all of those things, to what degree does Al Holcomb, the now former defensive coordinator with the Carolina Panthers, who Sean McDermott brought in as a senior defensive assistant, to what extent is that hire targeted in that area?
I think the Bills fully expect Al Holcomb to have a big role in what they do strategically from a defensive standpoint. He is going to be not only an extra set of eyes, but I think his opinions and thoughts on what they have to do to improve their defensive production is going to be huge. And it's not just up front. I mean, it starts there. He'll have a big say, I think, in how they structure and scheme with the front seven, but also on the back end. And we know the two areas relate together, work together. And I think the problems that the Bills had in their secondary, many of them caused by injury, are going to have to be resolved as well in order to help the front seven get more in the way of pressure on the quarterback, because, again, the secondary can force that QB to hold the ball longer.
All right, let's flip the switch here a little bit because, it's obvious to get into a discussion when a team comes up short, you focus on areas of need. And those are obvious, and we spent a good deal of time talking about them. But within all that, I want to point out some things that the Bills have relative to trends in the NFL. I think the Super Bowl, Vic, clearly showed the mobile quarterback, right? The Patrick Mahomes, the Jalen Hurts. This is a trend in the National Football League. You look at the young quarterbacks coming up, guys that even a guy like Joe Burrow, he's not as mobile as, say, a Josh Allen, a Mahomes, or a Hurts, but he can still move and extend plays when he needs to. But on the higher end of that, the Patrick Mahomes, the Josh Allens, those types of players, who obviously the Bills have one of them, and Allen. But from a defensive standpoint, I think you hear Sean McDermott talk about how the game is evolving. With the quarterback position, there's a defensive response. For every action, there's a reaction, right? And they have the type of linebacker in Matt Milano, for example, that teams covet across the National Football League because he can do so much. He can help you in pass coverage. He can rush the passer. He can defend against the run. He has speed sideline to sideline. And I think one of the big free agents, probably the biggest one, Tremaine Edmonds, yeah, he's big, but the range that he has, the speed that he has from sideline to sideline, I think fits that description to a large degree. And I think based on that trend and what the type of quarterback the Bills are going to have to continue facing well into the future, I think Edmonds has to be a top priority in terms of a re-signing.
Often when the other teams in the league look at the Super Bowl, especially the owners of those teams, they look at it as a model of, do we have that? Do we need that? Do we want that? And usually the answer is, we want that. Well, when the Bills looked at this Super Bowl, and especially at the top end of the organization, they can be satisfied that they've got the quarterback who can be a Super Bowl champion in Josh Allen, because that model, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, athleticism, extraordinary ad-libbing ability, things that go off script and making big plays. We know Josh Allen can do that. So the Bills have to at least have the satisfaction that they're right there with one of the top quarterbacks in the league, but with extraordinary ability just beyond dropping back and throwing passes. So that's a positive. The other thing the Bills have on the defensive side is those linebackers. Having Matt Milano, one of the very best in the league at what he does, and it's not just because he can fill the hole and stuff the run. He can also be an effective player in coverage. He is a ball hawk, one of the very best in the league at that, forcing turnovers, recovering fumbles, making interceptions, all those things that a linebacker does that you want. Expanded talent, expanded ability. He's there. And I think the other thing that the Super Bowl showed, especially from the Eagles standpoint, they didn't have the types of linebackers who play off the ball very well, because that's just not their philosophy. They believe in the bigger guys who are physical, strong, and can do wonderful things in terms of stopping the run and filling that box, but they don't necessarily do well in coverage. Well, the Bills, in not only Matt Milano, but also Tremaine Edmonds, have those kinds of players. And I think seeing what the Chiefs were able to do against the Eagles linebackers should tell the Bills, we better make sure you hang on to Tremaine Edmonds. You've got to make that a priority. Whatever the capologists have to do, the wizardry that has to be done with the numbers and adjusting contracts and making some hard decisions, cuts, should be done with an eye toward, first and foremost, keeping Tremaine Edmonds. Everything else after that, from a defensive standpoint, personnel-wise, is gravy.
All right, Vic Carucci, great takes. As always, much more with Vic at WGRZ.com, weekly with his Take Two columns, and, of course, Monday night, 7:30, Sports Talk Live, Buffalo. For Vic Carucci, Adam Benigni, Channel 2 Sports.